Thank you, Madam President. On October 7th, an actual genocidal terrorist organization that openly and proudly declares its genocidal agenda perpetrated actual genocidal acts. That same organization continues to attack Israel, to hold hostages in brutal conditions, and declares regularly its intention to repeat its atrocities again and again and again. And yet none of this has merited serious attention, let alone condemnation by this Council, or anything approaching the condemnation and revulsion it should merit in United Nations reports. The message to Israel's citizens and to the hostages, not only from some addressing this Council, but too often from the Council itself, has been, your humanity does not matter to us. You're not deserving of protection. Instead, Madam President, we are witness to an obscene inversion of reality. It is not Hamas that is being charged with genocide. It is not its supporters in Tehran and Pretoria that are being held to account. It is the country that is the victim of Hamas's genocidal campaign that is again and again and again the subject of outrageous accusations, the more extreme the better, that hinge on telling a story in which Hamas, its abuse of civilians and civilian infrastructure, and its utter brutality simply disappear. That this pattern of distorting so-called reality to the Security Council is a matter of routine does not make it morally acceptable. And it only compounds the disconnect between what is so often said in this chamber and what is happening in actual reality. A lie told 1,000 times is not less of a lie. Yes, the civilian suffering in this war, to both Israelis and Palestinians, is tragic. It is heart-wrenching. But it is impossible to understand this tragedy, much less respond to it, by spinning reality. As Israel stated before the ICJ, Israel is committed, as it must be, to comply with the law, and it does so in the face of Hamas's utter contempt for the law. Israel is committed, as it must be, to demonstrate humanity, but it does so in the face of Hamas's utter inhumanity. These commitments are unwavering and exist quite independently of any IJC proceedings. But if Hamas's contempt for the law is never part of the discussion, if its utter inhumanity towards Palestinian civilians as well as Israelis civilians is simply ignored, then we are not dealing with the agonizing reality and the dilemmas that Israel faces, seeking to minimize civilian harm against a lawless terrorist organization that seeks to maximize it. We are dealing with a libel. There is a reason the Palestinian representative today and the supporters of Hamas, such as South Africa and Algeria, must present so distorted a reality to the Council. It is obvious. For them, the brutal reality created by Hamas does not exist, and indeed cannot exist. For if it did, there would be no possible case of genocide. And the effort to demonize Israel, to tell a story where one side is the victim and the other side is a villain, would collapse. Rather, Israel will be a democratic country exercising its right and duty to defend its citizens under near impossible conditions and from a truly genocidal threat. Madam President, it is hardly surprising that those who have no qualms about distorting the facts have no hesitation about distorting the law. The very attempt to level the charge of genocide against Israel is an outrageous distortion of the Genocide Convention. It is an attempt to empty the word of its unique force and special meaning, and to turn the Convention itself into a tool of terrorists who have total disdain for life and for the law against those trying to defend against them. The same distortion of the law is now being applied in a transparent attempt to twist and misinterpret the decision of the Court on preliminary measures. The Court's decision on provisional measures was issued less than a week ago. The matter is before the Court. The arguments on the merits of the case have not even been heard, let alone decided. Yet already the Council has convened. Already the allegations have been levelled. Already the abusive and politicised nature of this process has been laid bare. The desperate attempt to ascribe blame is transparent political theatre, a verdict looking for a crime. So it seems appropriate to set the record straight. First, the assertion made with such confidence by the Palestinian representative that the Court has found plausible evidence of genocide is a prime example of this desperate distortion. This is a blatant mischaracterization of the very nature of the provisional measures phase of proceedings, of the term plausibility in the Court's jurisprudence, and of the Court's actual decision. The Court could not have been clearer that it has not and could not make at this preliminary stage any finding on the charge of genocide levelled by South Africa. Israel is confident that South Africa's libel against Israel will be rejected by the ICJ at the merits phase of proceedings. Already it has been widely denounced by numerous states known for their commitment to the rule of law. But the court at this early phase of proceedings had no authority to make findings on the merits and did not do so. As the court stated in paragraph 30, and I quote, "At the present stage of the proceedings, the court is not required to ascertain whether any violations of Israel's obligations under the Genocide Convention have occurred. Such a finding could be made by the court only at the stage of the examination of the merits of the present case." End of quote. Later, presumably realizing that some may have difficulty understanding this paragraph, the court reiterated this assertion in paragraph 62 and then again in paragraph 84. It stated, "The decision given in the present proceedings is in no way prejudges the question of the jurisdiction of the court to deal with the merits of the case or any questions relating to the admissibility of the application or to the merits themselves." End of quote. If the point wasn't clear enough in the decision, Judges Bandari and Nolte in their declarations also left no room for misunderstanding. So much for the claim that South Africa's outrageous and false accusations have been given legitimacy by the court. Second, the supporters of Hamas genocidal terrorism are similarly and ludicrously trying to assert that the court has called on Israel to cease its military operations. The opposite is the case. In fact, the court unanimously and rightly rejected South Africa's vile attempt to undermine Israel's inherent right to defend itself against the genocidal terrorists of Hamas. Not a single judge suggested otherwise, nor could they have. The very idea that Israel would be denied this fundamental right while Hamas would be free to continue its terrorist onslaught and hold hostages in brutal captivity is morally and legally unthinkable. Indeed, by emphasizing that both parties to the conflict are bound by international humanitarian law, the court clearly indicated that it understands that military operations will continue. The egregious provisional measures requested by South Africa were effectively and summarily dismissed by the court. The measures indicated relate in practice to existing legal obligations to which Israel is already committed. As demonstrated in word and deed, Israel's war is against Hamas, not against Palestinian civilians. This is a matter of explicit government policy, military directives and procedures. It is no less an expression of Israel's core values. As stated, our commitment to uphold the law, including our obligations under international humanitarian law, is unwavering and exists independent of any IJC proceedings and of Hamas's contempt for the law. In this context, Israel remains committed to mitigating civilian harm and to facilitating access to humanitarian aid according to the law, despite all the challenges, while also seeking to assure, as this Council noted in Resolution 2720, both its humanitarian nature and that it reaches its civilian destination and is not stolen by Hamas. Israel is continuing to work with international stakeholders to further advance this objective. Israel is also committed to preventing incitement. Like every law-abiding democracy, Israel makes rigorous efforts to draw the line between permissible statements, even those that express pain and outrage in times of crisis, and those which go beyond the limits of free speech. As Israel's Attorney General stated publicly recently, any statement calling for intentional harm to civilians contradicts the policy of the State of Israel and may amount to a criminal offense, including the offense of incitement. Several such cases are currently being examined by Israeli law enforcement authorities. And Israel also respects the role given to the ICJ for the settlement of disputes. What it does not respect is the blatant abuse of the court and its procedures by South Africa and the unconscionable efforts to distort the truth in support of a genocidal terrorist organization at the expense of both Israelis and Palestinians, who both deserve a peaceful and prosperous future free of the death cult of Hamas. Finally, Madam President, it is quite telling that in the warped description of the court's decision by Hamas's defenders, no mention is made of the court's grave concern for the hostages and its unequivocal call for their immediate and unconditional release. Nor, of course, is mention made of the call of one of the judges for South Africa to use its warm relations with the terrorist organization to help secure the hostages' release. It is telling, but not surprising. Nothing about the description we have heard of the court's decision, nothing about this grotesque use of the ICJ, nothing about the breathless convening of this meeting of the Security Council has to do with the law. It is about distorting the facts and the law so that they can be used as a weapon, and it is an assault on the integrity of the ICJ as an institution as much as it is an assault on the truth. It should be treated by this Council accordingly. Many today have raised the issue of UNRWA and the active and direct role that employees of this UN agency played in the October 7th massacre. Israel welcomes the decision of many countries to suspend their funding to UNRWA and calls for an in-depth, independent and transparent investigation into the agency's conduct in the Gaza Strip, both regarding the involvement of UNRWA employees in the October 7th massacre and regarding the employment of Hamas operatives and the involvement of terrorist elements in its activities. Madam President, incredibly, the Security Council has convened again and again to discuss the situation, to discuss the spin and distortions of Hamas's supporters, and yet it still has been unable to condemn the massacres of October 7th by the genocidal terrorists of Hamas, their genocidal incitement, or their reprehensible terrorist strategy that causes untold suffering to both Israeli and Palestinian civilians. Until it does, this Council will fail to meet its responsibilities. It will continue to be abused as a forum where lies can be told, where the law can be manipulated to serve its greatest violators, where the victims of terrorism will feel abandoned, and where, in the words of Judge Barak at the ICJ, the crimes of Cain can be attributed to Abel. I thank you.